Hello, I'm Thomas Hicks, Vice-Chairman of the United States Election Assistance Commission. And with me today is Tom Connolly, Director of Operations for the State Board of Elections in New York. We're going to talk a little bit about a fantastic meeting that happened in New York over the summer. And I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. And obviously, it's a really important conversation for us to be having. I think that all election officials throughout the country are dealing with new threats from a cybersecurity standpoint. And I think that we're still looking for kind of the best way forward. And what are the things that we can learn from what other people are doing? And I think that what it really comes down to from the beginning is that we need to establish and facilitate the right relationships with people.
Can you describe what the meeting was and who was actually there?
Sure. So, I mean, it kind of started out with our governor has a cybersecurity advisory panel that we were working with last year for the 2016 elections. And from that, we started developing relationships with state and federal agencies. We started to have conversations with the state and federal DHS, emergency management, and other like state police. And so what we had done was we had put together a meeting that we held down in New York City with about 50 different attendees that represented those organizations that I just mentioned, obviously emergency management, Homeland Security, members from the armed forces, especially their cybersecurity components, the FBI. We had some people from educational institutions. Mm-hmm. And I think that what we were looking to do, we had some state representation from the Board of Elections. We also had some local boards there. Mm-hmm. And what we were really looking
at... the EAC was there as well.
Correct, right. I apologize.
No.
Yes. And we had invited the EAC who attended. And what we were looking to do was have a large conversation about that would help the people understand the processes that are at play in elections. And then we can kind of discuss the different threats that might jeopardize the electoral process. Because obviously, one of our core missions in what we do is to maintain voter confidence in the integrity of elections.
Right. One of the things that I took away from this was that New York and New York State is very unique in that on 9/11, New York was actually running an election. And so this was something that I felt was part of this as well. And it seemed like there's no other state really doing what New York did for that meeting.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's something that we've unfortunately gotten a little familiar with. I mean, whether it was 9/11 for primary election day or even, Sandy, mm-hmm. And then we had Tropical Storm Irene and Lee. I mean, we elections can't get moved. Election day is election day, and we have to have elections. So even though we obviously do have contingency plans in place that boards were following in those kind of scenarios, mm-hmm. This is just one more scenario that we have to kind of plan for. And so what we try to be doing, and yes, it does seem that from some of the feedback that we received, not a lot of states are doing some of the things that New York is doing, but we're happy to share that experience with other people. I mean, I think that too often you have a lot of organizations that are compartmentalized, so they don't really share the information, or they just don't have the relationships that are there. And it really doesn't take much to create those relationships. We've been lucky. We did have some relationships that we started last year for the 2016 cycle, mm-hmm. And that's really been carried forward. And we're looking to only strengthen those and develop new ones.
Would you say it's better to have that communication ahead of time before Election Day?
Yeah, it's always better because I think through the engagement process with these different partners, you're also going to help educate in both directions. Mm-hmm. You're going to help educate them as to what we do as elections professionals, and you're going to also understand about things that you may not normally think of. I mean, elections professionals know elections, but they're not necessarily expected to be professionals when it comes to cybersecurity. Right. So, I mean, obviously we have to know at least some base level of what to expect, what the threats are, how do we mitigate those threats. But I think that we can't be expected to wear both hats and own them. So, I mean, I think we have to kind of realize that we need professionals in that field that we can rely on, and that's where developing those relationships really comes into play.
Well, I hope that the EAC can call on you to help us when we go around the country to different states, because we talk to all 50 states and the territories as well. Because I think that my participation there was great to see how New York, because it's so unique, was with the Port Authority, not only with New York State, but New Jersey and parts of Connecticut as well, coming together to talk about these issues. So I'm wondering what sort of feedback you've gotten from that day if any, that you can talk to us about?
Well, I think all the feedback that we've received has been extremely positive. I mean, I think that people were really just kind of surprised that we were able to pull that off. I mean, we had heard from some federal partners that, they wish that other states would be doing this, that we really were the first ones to be able to get all these different players in one room. I think it really goes to the importance of educating these people, because like I said before, they are really professionals in their field, and we have to rely on them just as we need them to rely on us being professionals in our field. I think that we realize on a number of different levels engagement is key. And so when you mentioned going around to the other states, obviously we think that in New York, we certainly have plenty that we can share with states as to how we've gone about things, but we also want to get some of that information from them as well. We know that with DHS contacting the 21 states that whose systems may have been targeted, that doesn't necessarily mean just because New York was not one of those 21 that we don't suffer the same vulnerabilities that other states do. We may have just got lucky and dodged a bullet, or we may have just not been targeted for some other reason. So I think that what I hope comes out of the overall process is that we really figure out a way to share information with one another, not just between election administrators throughout the country, but also some of these other organizations like Homeland Security, Emergency Management, so we can kind of really learn best practices. And I think that the EAC is really a very good organization to help kind of propagate that.
Right. So what I'm hearing is that even though New York wasn't part of those 21, that there still could be scans that could have been done by other actors. So you're always going to be prepared for that.
I think
try to be prepared.
Right,
for
and
that.
I think that we have to kind of try to be prepared for that, because just because the election systems may not be the target, they could certainly be the victim. We had that recently in one of our counties where there was a ransomware attack on one of the smaller counties that wasn't targeted at the elections, the County Board of Elections. But the County Board of Elections shares a lot of IT resources with other agencies in the county, which is very commonplace throughout New York. So the problem that, their one system or a couple of their servers got locked up negatively affects the county, and this was right before primary elections. So we had to kind of scramble to do whatever we could do to provide them with assistance. We have to recognize that, like I said, sometimes we're not the intended target, but we can often become the victim. Last October in 2016, we had the Dyn attack that took down a lot of DNS that affected anywhere like Twitter and Amazon and all these other things, which could very well affect, say a county board or a state board's website for unofficial election results. But that really wasn't targeted. That was actually came out of, I believe, some sort of gaming background as far as somebody why they kind of propagated that attack. So I think we just need to kind of prepare for these things, and we do that through the resiliency of our system, and also ensuring that there are redundancies where they need to be, especially when it comes to information.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to leave our audience with? Some sort of must-dos or things that they should look out for, or how they can go about having some sort of function with their other authorities to, or how they can contact you if they have questions on this?
Well, I mean, anyone's welcome to contact me at the state board, and you can find my contact information on our website, which is just elections.ny.gov. I think what I really want to leave people with is this kind of phrase of just, education through engagement. I mean, I think that we have a lot to learn as election officials about cybersecurity, and I think that the cybersecurity specialists have a lot to learn about elections. And the only way that you're really going to be able to accomplish that education is through the engagement process. And to kind of start those conversations or start those relationships really shouldn't take much. It doesn't take money. It just takes the effort to make a phone call. Reach out to organizations that you might have. Reach out to your, if you're a state level person, reach out to your state police or your governor's office. Ask them. If you could just set up meetings with emergency management or Homeland Security, maybe they have resources or tools that you can then provide down to the local level. Because we know that resources are sparse, especially, and that's not just, to the election sphere, that's to all across the country. And so I think that it's important for us not to try to reinvent the wheel. So, have those conversations, establish those relationships, figure out what resources you might have at your disposal, and figure out then best through the engagement process and having conversations how best to leverage them.